Yes. Oh, good, good. Let me say that again. Thank you so much, brothers and sisters, for being here and for tackling this issue, this critical issue of the title of this program is How to Support Returning Citizens. And that's what GBIO, the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, has designated that as one of their top priorities, top 4 priorities. And we're on board with them at Temple Beth Zion in Brookline, and we're going to learn a lot about it today, and we're going to keep learning about it. But I'm thrilled to have four speakers today, and we have 3 returning citizens, actually people who were formerly incarcerated, Jackie Scott and Danelle. Am I talking too loud, by the way?
No,
it's
good.
Oh, all right. Okay. I feel like I'm shouting. Jackie Scott and no, I'm only kidding. Jackie and Danelle Wright. And I am so thrilled to have Jackie and Danelle. I've seen them in a couple of Zooms. I saw them, the 2 of them were at a Boston City Council a few weeks ago talking about this issue, and it was such a powerful meeting. There were others as well, but at the end of the meeting, Councillor Flynn said this was the most powerful meeting of the city council he'd ever been to. And I guess he's been, I don't know exactly, but I guess he's been a city council person for a long time. But so Jackie and Danelle are here, wonderful educators, as you will see in a minute. Carter, is Carter here?
Yep, Carter's in.
Great. Okay. And Carter Reed, I'm so thrilled to have here. I first met Carter, just say, years ago when Carter was incarcerated at Shirley Medium. I used to take my students over to Shirley Medium, and we would meet with Project Youth. And Project Youth, Carter was one of the leaders of Project Youth, and he would tell his story and his a little bit about his life to my students, and it was always very, very powerful and enlightening. And Carter is out doing wonderful things. I know he's working on life sentences, trying to get life sentences reduced or eliminated. And I'm so happy to have Carter here. And also the last minute, we have Lou Finfer is able to join us. I tried for a while to get him and finally got him about just an hour ago or something. And Lou's going to speak for a while. Lou is the director of Mass Communities Action Network, and they're doing tremendous amount of work with the state legislatures on this issue. And Lou's going to kind of get us up to date a little bit on the legislation that's in front of the legislature. So, and I'm so grateful to Lou for being here. Let's see, I'll just say, and then we can start let's see, hold on, I'm sticking to a tight schedule. Let me open with a little prayer, a very, very short prayer, but it is the words of the Dalai Lama, the words of the Dalai Lama, and I think all of us can use his advice in this prayer. It's called Never Give Up. Never give up. No matter what is going on, never give up. Develop the heart. Too much energy in your country is spent developing the mind instead of the heart. Be compassionate, not just to your friends, but to everyone. Work for peace. Be compassionate, not just to your friends, but to everyone. Be compassionate. Work for peace in your heart and in the world. Work for peace. And I say again, never give up. No matter what is going on around you, never give up. Amen. Amen to that.
Amen.
I know we all can use that. So now, I was going to say just a couple of words. I'm sticking to a tight schedule here. Let me just say, this issue is crucial. 600, I want to invite you take a minute and just put your name in the chat.
Hey.
Put your name in the chat if you can, the organization you're with, and why you're here. Why you're here. Your name in the chat and your organization that you're with and why you're here.
Yep. And if you could mute, that would be helpful, because when we hear our storytellers, it would be helpful not to hear the background noise. Thank you.
That's good. Yes. So yeah, just put something. I won't talk for about 30 seconds, and just maybe people can put that in.
I'm just going to start reading a few of them, why people are here.
Okay.
I'm here to listen and learn. Here as part of the GBIO core team to learn how to activate. Here to support inmates who've been connected for years and to support this activity and to support Jerry. Somebody from Northeastern University, School of Criminology and Criminal Justice. Friends of speaker, Jackie Scott. Social worker working with individuals experiencing incarceration, passionate about dismantling systems of violence and oppression. I'm here to learn more about how I can advocate for formerly incarcerated individuals. And excited to learn new insights, here to listen and learn. Here to help give returning citizens a fighting second chance. Inciting connecting to my work for gun violence prevention and breaking the silence of violence and trauma. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, I'll just say a couple of words and then I'll turn it over to our speakers. Approximately 600,000 prisoners are released from federal and state prison each year. 600,000. And about 9 million people go in and out of jails each year. So 9 million. In Massachusetts, I think it's about 3,000 people coming out each year from prisons in Massachusetts. For many, probably most, the deprivation and the stigma of incarceration continues after the release from prison. People on the whole, a lot of them are damaged. They are damaged, they are wounded. A lot of people were wounded which got them into prison in the first place. People come out of prison and it's extremely difficult. And our society, the bottom line is we put obstacles in the way of people coming out of prison, as I'm sure Jackie and Danelle and Carter will talk about. We make it extremely difficult. And in fact, they're called returning citizens, but you know what? I heard returning citizens, but these citizens that are coming out, they're not real citizens because we make so many obstacles for them. It's impossible for them to get jobs a lot of times. It's impossible for them to get housing. It's impossible for them to get food, basic needs, a lot of them. That's not true citizenship. So, you know, the whole connection of coming out of prison is of course tied in with incarceration in general. And we have an inhuman incarceration system. We incarcerate 2 million people in prisons and jails. We're even the worst countries in the world. The next closest country to us, El Salvador, Rwanda, Brazil, Russia, all the major industrial democracies have absolutely much lower rates of incarceration than we do. I'll leave you with this thought and then I'll turn it over because there's so much we could talk about. If we had a decent society, if we had a society that cared about people, that supported communities, that had good schools, good housing, provided safety and care for people, basic things like that, we wouldn't need prisons. And prisons are what some people call a default mode for our neoliberal capitalist society and our racist society. We will be talking about racism because the racism is definitely a part of it. But thank you for joining us, and let's hear from right now from Lou Finster. Lou, you
Thank
might
you,
be.
Jack, for inviting me. I'm Lou Finfer. I'm with Massachusetts Communities Action Network, MCAN. Like GBIO, MCAN is a faith-based community organization, and we work in cities across the state. In 2016 to 18, we worked as an ally to GBIO in the statewide campaign to pass the Criminal Justice Reform Act of 2018. And a long time ago, I actually served as co-director of GBIO from 1996 to 2002. We've been working on funding for reentry at the state level, and in a campaign we worked on $11.25 million was passed in December of last year for reentry programs, and we're working with the state agencies who are going to be developing an RFP soon to groups to apply for that reentry funding. There's also 2 pending sources in the state budget that we're working on for additional funds for reentry. One is for a pilot program to provide rent subsidies to people in reentry, because having stable housing is extremely important, as anyone can imagine, for people in reentry, as it is for anyone. That was funded at $2 million in the House. We're not sure it'll be funded in the Senate. And the last program is called the Community Empowerment and Reinvestment Grant Program, which previously was funded at $20 million, and it gives grants to 62 groups doing reentry and intervention programs across the state. And the House did not fund it in their budget, but the Senate has funded it at $20 million. So those 2 last programs I mentioned, the pilot program on rent subsidies and the Community Empowerment Reinvestment Grant Program, will go to what's called the House Senate Conference Committee in June. And I can send you some information in the next weeks on what you might be able to do to support getting that funding passed in the final budget in June. So that would, could be considerable funding, not enough, but considerable funding where there wasn't hardly anything before. So I know I need to finish, so I'll stop now, and you can go on, Jerry, unless there's time for questions.
Oh, that's great. You have a couple more minutes if you want to add something.
Maybe I could let people ask questions because I said a lot.
Okay. 2 minutes. And anybody want to ask a question about what's going on here with the legislature and stuff? Well,
Lou, great appreciation for you and everything you've been working on for many decades. Do you feel are we making more progress at the state level? We are losing ground at the federal level on everything, but are we making more progress, particularly for formerly incarcerated people? Is it getting better?
Thank you, Jen. Well, this is a special year, and next year we're involved in. There's an extraordinary amount of federal money came to Massachusetts through the American Rescue Plan Act. $5 billion came to Massachusetts. So that's why we organized people to ask the legislature to put some of it into reentry, and they agreed to spend 11.25. The state budget also has a surplus. So I think that's given us more of a chance to get increases and some new programs like we're talking about. But probably by next year, this extra money is going to be gone. So we will be scrapping it out from there. And these are good amounts of money that I mentioned, but obviously the problem is much bigger than that. But it is significant funding for new programs that we haven't had before. So in that sense, there is a better picture at the state. But part of that picture was fueled by the major federal American Rescue Plan Act that was passed by President Biden and the Democrats in Congress last year. It's a massive bill on the order. It gets lost in all the back and forth and everything, but it's a massive bill on the order of a New Deal type program that we revere when thinking about it. But I'll send you the information on how you can help on that last stage of the budget process. And hopefully that will create more funding for reentry, and some of the returning citizens who address you, their groups they're with, they certainly could also apply for this. And if you send me the information, we'll send it to them as well. I have to run to another meeting, but I appreciate the invitation, Jack, and people could contact me with further questions. It's nice to see Jen and Susan, who I know who are part of the meeting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lou. Really appreciate it. Our next speaker, and the following three speakers, Jackie and Carter and Danelle, they'll tell you a little bit about their lives and a little bit of how they ended up in prison, and especially about reentry and coming out and some of the challenges for reentry. So we'll start with Jackie Scott.
Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future. My life's worth the living just because he lives. I hadn't thought of that song in years, since I attended the childhood church in Maryland, little white clapper church that my mom and I used to walk to. That song was part of the regular rotation of hymns. Well, I sang that song that night in the wee hours with my hands handcuffed behind me in the squad car. I was 63 years old, and I really wasn't sure whether I was going to make it through the night into the next morning. Shalom, Erev Tov. My name is Jacqueline Scott, and I'm a grateful and lucky returning citizen. I'm lucky to have survived and been given the gift to begin again. For 3.5 years, I was known by my prison ID number, F8617, which I wore daily, clipped to my shirt or the outermost garment. But all the staff and my fellow inmates and all the CEOs referred to me as Ms. Scott, no matter how much I protested. I probably look like someone's mother, and I am. I probably look like someone's grandmother, and I am. I probably look like a retiree, and I am, after working my whole adult life, the last 29 years of which were for the same firm that I was employed at the time of my arrest. I am 70 years old. What I probably don't look like is a convicted felon, and I am. Or put another way, I have a felony conviction for which I take full responsibility, was incarcerated, successfully completed parole, and now I'm a returning citizen. I am your neighbor. I'm here today to share my story, for you to see and put a face to and a name on a returning citizen. So now you can say you actually know one, not just a statistic. At the lowest point of my life, when I was 63 years old, my world imploded. I was distraught. I faced arrest, prison, and the criminal justice system for the first time. Just like in the movies, you actually are given one phone call, but it was the wee hours of the night. I was in my bedclothes. I had no shoes. I had no glasses. And who was I going to call anyway? And what was I going to ask them to do for me? But I thought of my boss. I said, I really should let him know I'm not going to be in work the next day. So the officer was kind enough to dial the number. My boss answered. I tearfully explained what I had done. He cursed. And then he said, "You're going to be okay." And he kept his promise. Because he continued my salary for an entire year after my arrest. He and other attorneys that I'd worked with came to court and testified on my behalf, and I was granted parole, probation while I awaited trial. The firm paid my bail fee. At that time, when I could see no way through to the morning, let alone a future, a friend, actually an acquaintance, who I'd known for several years doing volunteer work together. We had never socialized. He and his wife, unbeknownst to me, contacted my counsel and made arrangements with the court so that I could stay with them while I awaited trial when bail was granted. Together with his wife, whom I'd only met in passing and been introduced to, treated me to a room of my own and his family during what stretched into 22 months of home confinement with ankle bracelet while awaiting trial. They met and got to know my friends and my family. I met theirs and the neighbors, including the neighbor's next door cat, a Maine Coon cat who adopted me, and I'd never been around cats. That same couple corresponded with and visited me for the 3.5 years of my incarceration. I believe their unselfish act of generosity, humanity, and kindness qualifies as a mitzvah. I know how incredibly lucky I am that they reached out. When I was released on June 26, 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, after being in lockdown for 23 hours of the day for 3 months at South Middlesex, I again considered myself lucky to have been paroled to the new home of yet another friend, her husband, and their 3 powerful, exuberant, and affectionate rescue dogs who accepted me as part of their pack. My homecoming was possible in large measure through luck and kindness. My successful reentry into the community happened because people cared enough, and I had the blessing of an abundance of support and resources. But let's face it, most people currently incarcerated will be released to the community eventually. We will all one day become your neighbors. I wear a bracelet that I received at one of the first in-person masses I was able to attend once I was fully vaccinated. It reads in Latin and in English, "Begin again." That very simply is what all returning citizens wish to do, are exhorted and expected to do. Begin again against stigma and incredible odds when programs and services, resources, housing, job training, and educational opportunities are non-existent or severely underfunded. People leave incarceration without state-issued IDs every day, just as I did, and often face the catch-22 of being unable to obtain them because of lack of documentation. We returning citizens are further handicapped by an ORC, that's Office of Returning Citizens, tasked with serving the 3,000
See, Jackie, you're
Boston area from
Jackie, you're breaking up. Maybe
Oh.
go back a little bit. We just missed the last 15 seconds or something.
Okay, sorry about that. I am tech challenged. I'm old, so bear with me.
You're fine right now. You're back,
Okay,
back to
it's nerves and Parkinson's. That's, okay. I was fortunate to have been able to access the Boston ORC when more funding and staffing was in place. I felt welcomed into a vibrant and active returning citizen community. I want that for all returning citizens. I saved an email I excitedly sent to the ORC Advisory Board Chairman, Jim Carey, early one morning, August 18th. That was about 2 months after I'd been released. Jim, Saturday, I signed a 12-month lease for a room in JP. Though it is not my forever place, it's a first step. I appreciate you sharing your story because it helped me believe there'd be a place for me. What my friends did in welcoming me into their homes, I believe is called a mitzvah. I don't know whether there's a group or collective mitzvah possible. If not, maybe there should be. After all, aren't we all family, community, responsible for keeping one another? It should not be a matter of luck or an act of faith that a returning citizen succeeds to begin again. And by the way, my boss did stick by me. And the first thing I saw in the room at my friend's house when I was released, June 26, 2020, was a large bouquet of yellow roses. I didn't know he even knew those were my favorites. Thank you. Toda Rabah?
Jackie, beautiful, beautiful. Yes, mitzvah, mitzvah. You got, your pronunciation was perfect. Can't hear you.
I'm getting there.
Ah, no. You nailed it. Beautiful, Jackie. Thank you. Thank you so much. And there is such a thing as a collective mitzvah, right? You know, it also reminded me what you said. I know I shouldn't. There's a beautiful song that we sing at the synagogue called Begin Again, right? Someone begin again, begin again, return to the land of your soul, return to who you are, return to what you are. Oh gee, I'll send you its copy, but your talk really reminded me of that. Thank you. So, and I know people may have questions, and we'll have a little period for questions. But now I want to introduce Carter Reed, Mr. Carter Reed. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for having me and listening to my thoughts and introspection on my own personal journey, how I got to be where I was and how I got to be where I am. And if at any point my service cuts out, please let me know. My laptop's acted up, or my internet service is acting up. So I'll switch to my phone if necessary. But so I'd like to share with you a little bit about my background. As Jerry alluded to earlier, I met him while I was in prison, so you kind of know where I ended up at some point in my life. But I think that early part of my journey is probably very similar to most, if almost really all of the people that I encountered in prison and that we know, which is that I came from a broken, dysfunctional family. My parents were unwed teenagers at the time I was born. Neither one of them had graduated high school. They both struggled with addiction to alcohol, and my father eventually to drugs. And my childhood was plagued with domestic violence, infidelity, separations from my parents, a lot of the things that plagued many of the men I encountered in prison, and I'm sure the women that Jackie encountered in prison. And by the time I was 15 years old, my father was one of the victims of our country's insane push known as the war on drugs. My father ended up being arrested and charged with drug trafficking and eventually sentenced to 18 to 20 years in prison for trafficking cocaine. And of course, you can imagine as a 15-year-old, that was incredibly traumatic, despite all of the tumult at home and all of the dysfunction that I experienced. It still was beyond disruptive to lose my father to prison like that. And somehow I managed up to that point to get by well in school. By the grace of God, I was blessed with the gift of being able to learn readily. And I wasn't, I like to tell everyone, and I still to this day would say, I was pretty much a good kid. I wasn't, I didn't act out. I wasn't getting in trouble. And that was, sort of an avenue for me. Again, despite all of the dysfunction in my home, my parents really pushed from an early age, the importance of education and the fact that I was gifted academically, and that would be the key to my success in the future. And it was really expected from, the earliest age that I would be the first in my family to go to college and break that cycle of not finishing high school and being mired in low wage jobs. I mean, my father worked in a factory until it closed down, and then basically worked odd jobs and sold drugs on the side to help support the family. And my mother was a full-time stay-at-home mom. So, it was really, again, instilled in me the idea that, I would be able to take my education somewhere that my parents hadn't, and that would be a difference maker for me. But again, like, most kids growing up in an inner city with that kind of background, I wasn't in trouble, but I gravitated toward the things that most, teenage boys want to do, which is, to fit in and be accepted and respected, and, to be a loyal friend. And so at the age of 16, when one of my friends was attacked by another group of kids, he decided he wanted to, confront them and retaliate. And of course, again, I didn't think twice about it. My mindset and mentality was, I'm going to be the best and most loyal friend that I could be. So I was, in my mind, looking back a little delusional, but I just thought, here I am, I'm going to help my friend, whatever he needs. And so we went to confront these group of kids, and unfortunately things, didn't go any way that any of us anticipated. And in the events that ensued, I ended up stabbing one of the young men. I was 16 years old. I stabbed another 16-year-old boy, one of the kids who was involved in the attack on my friend, and I was arrested for assault and battery with a dangerous weapon and trespassing and a few other minor things. And on the one hand, I was a little bit nervous and scared. I had never been in any kind of real legal trouble or anything. I had no dealings with the courts. And, on the other hand, I felt empowered. I thought that I had, stood up for my friend and was supportive. They brought me to the police station and they told me, you're a juvenile. When your mother gets here, you can leave. And so I waited at the police station for what seemed like an eternity. I was first time ever being in a cell. I was losing my mind, and I finally couldn't take it anymore and started, pounding on the door, trying to get an officer's attention. And an officer stepped into the cell and he said, listen, kid, you're aware of the incident that happened, at the school today. A young man was stabbed and you were involved. And I said, yes. And then he said, that young man has died, and you're now being charged with his murder. And my heart instantly dropped into my stomach, and I thought I was going to be sick. And I wish more than anything in the world I could say it's because I felt so guilty and remorseful for what I had done. But I was just terrified about how much trouble I was in. Then he told me my mother was there and wanted to see me, and I told him to tell her to leave. I didn't want to see her. Eventually, he dragged me upstairs to see my mother, and we had a little conversation without them in the room, and they came back in, and I said, I just need to tell them everything that happened and, explain to them that this isn't what I intended, and, they'll see it the way that I see it, and the courts will see it the way that I see it. And so they came in the room, they took my statement, and I thought, okay, here we go. We'll go through this process, and, they'll see that I was just a kid, that I made a mistake, that I was sorry and never meant for any of this to happen. And so I was sent to the Department of Youth Services to await a transfer hearing to determine whether I would be tried as a juvenile or as an adult. And after a little more than a year, the court decided to try me as an adult. And I was transferred to the county jail for almost another year before I went to trial. And I went to trial at the age of 18. And I was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. So I was 16 years old when I was arrested. I became parole eligible at the age of 31. I started my incarceration with kind of the same mentality I had in the police station, that this was, tragic and awful, but it wasn't what I intended. So I wasn't really responsible, and I was going through the program that Jerry talked about, Project Youth. I was involved at MCI Norfolk as well before being transferred. And I had been incarcerated about 4.5 years. I was 21 years old, and I was doing the program, and I was trying to make a contribution and do something productive with myself while I was inside. And I would speak to these kids, and I would, share my story and the insight that I had. And I thought I was doing a good job. And most of these kids that were coming in weren't much younger than me. And so one day after a meeting at this program, the coordinator, who was another lifer, he was actually an older gentleman who had been running the program for years. He pulled me aside afterward and he said, "Hey, I spoke to the teachers after the presentation this morning, and they said you did a terrific job. The kids were really, very impressed by you. They really can relate to you. You have a great story." He paused for a moment and then he said, "But they think you need to take more responsibility." And at first I was completely taken aback and dumbfounded. I couldn't believe here we had another lifer like me telling me that I had to take more responsibility. And I just looked at him and I said, "How can you even say that?" I said, "I just stood there in front of 50 kids and said that I did it. What more responsibility can I take?" And I can't begin to tell you why, other than the grace of God, that he didn't try to argue with me or rationalize or explain to me what he saw or what everyone else around me could see. He didn't bother trying to get through that wall of denial I had built for 5 years. He looked at me and said the one thing that could possibly change me. He said, "Sleep on it, just sleep on it." And he turned and walked away. And I was literally livid. I was disgusted. I couldn't believe that he had said that to me, that he was taking this teacher's side. And I walked back to my unit, not even thinking about it. I went to bed, not even thinking about it. And I woke up at 3 a.m, sobbing my eyes out for the first time in my life, not because I felt sorry for myself, but because I realized how much suffering and pain that I had caused. And I made a promise to myself right then, in the middle of the night, that I was going to do everything that I could to better myself, that I was going to do everything in my power to honor the victim and his family, and do anything possible to atone in any way that I could. And it is no exaggeration to say from that moment forward, I went on an absolute crusade. I got involved in programs. I asked the director of treatment, "Sign me up for whatever you have." And when I completed a program, I wrote to the director and said, "How can I become a facilitator, a mentor, a moderator? How can I stay involved in these programs? How can I share what I've learned with other people who've also taken these programs? How can I give back to the community around me?" And I continued that crusade right up to the age of 31 when I saw parole, and I was actually granted parole at my initial parole hearing, something almost unheard of at the time. Unfortunately, I didn't get released because the prescription of the parole board required me to do 6 months in a pre-release facility, which was really an 18-month process because of all the red tape. Well, during that 18-month process, I received a minor disciplinary report, something stupid I shouldn't have done. I was in a pre-release and I had nutritional supplements from the vitamin shop or GNC in my locker I wasn't supposed to have. During a routine cell search, they found them. They wrote me a disciplinary report, and that should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. The parole board rescinded my parole and scheduled me for a hearing in front of the parole board, which could result either in me being re-paroled or receiving up to a 5-year setback. And I just was so afraid to roll the dice and take that chance. I just kept postponing the hearing. I postponed it and postponed it for 2 years until my family was losing their minds. I should have been out. And eventually I said, I'm not willing to subject myself to that and take that chance. I'm going to challenge their decision legally. And so I took 6 months of studying, and then I filed the civil suit against the parole board stating that they didn't have sufficient reason to rescind my parole. And it was the first thing I had ever filed in court. I didn't know anything about the legal process other than what I learned in that 6 months. And right away, I got a decision from the court in my favor in response to the parole board's motion to dismiss. It was denied. Their motion to dismiss was denied. The judge basically said in his decision that my case, was fully meritorious, and it was clear to him that I was going to succeed in the case. And I thought, well, that's it. I go home now. And that wasn't the case. It was actually another 18 months, 4 years in total. And each step of the way, the parole board filed for summary judgment. I defeated this motion for summary judgment. The case was scheduled for trial, and I still wasn't getting anywhere. And eventually, again, by the grace of God, an attorney took the case on. I had been pro se up to that point. An attorney took the case on pro bono. And the day before we were to start trial, I called home, and my mother said, "You need to call Dick right away. He needs to speak to you." So I hung up with my mother and I called my attorney, and he said, "The parole board wants to settle for your immediate release." And I said, "How soon can you get here? I'll sign whatever you need me to sign." So he came and we signed the paperwork. And of course, it doesn't go that quickly, but 4.5 months after that, on August 5th, 2013, after more than 20 years in prison, I was released on parole. And although the beginning of my story, I said that my situation is much like most of the people I encountered in prison, my reentry wasn't. And that's because I left prison after more than 20 years to a parking lot full of family and friends there to greet me and assist me and provide me with all of the means I needed to succeed. My family, who had once upon a time been, dysfunctional and screwed up themselves pretty much, almost all during those intervening 20 years had managed to get their own lives together. And so when I was released, I had an amazing support network there for me that the average person doesn't have. And despite having, what amounts to a horrific criminal record with the, most egregious offense that anyone could have on their record, I was still set up for success. I was paroled to a halfway house residential treatment program. I did 6 months there, and I got involved in a relationship which was also very beneficial to me. It allowed me to transition from there into an apartment. And then, it wasn't really until a couple of years ago when somebody asked me about, I've been out almost 9 years now. It's crazy to think. 2 weeks ago, I just earned my second degree. I had my commencement for my second degree that I've earned since being released. I own a home. I'm actually in the process of building a new home right now. I'm married. I have a wife and stepchildren. Again, I've gone to college, and I've been very involved in criminal justice reform. I've met and spoken with all the, Massachusetts legislation in groups, in person, in small meetings. I've met with their staffs. I've testified at the State House numerous times. I've been involved in several criminal justice reform activities in the community, trying to bring awareness to these things. But in spite of all that, again, it wasn't until a couple of years ago when somebody asked me, a friend of mine, a fellow lifer who was released a few years ago, we'd gotten in contact with one another, and he asked me about jobs. And I got to thinking about it. And despite all of my qualifications, despite the 2, college degrees and support network and a great, consistent work history since my release, I've actually been terminated or, not hired for, I think now, 7 different jobs as a result of my record. And I always thought I conduct myself in a way, kind of like Jackie said, something that, people who interact with me would never in a million years, even fathom that I had been in the situation that I was in, let alone, would I come across that way to anyone in any of my dealings with them. And I just always thought that would be, the key to me to overcome, my record, that people would just look at me and see, the sort of, work history and ethic that I exhibit on a daily basis, and that would overcome those sort of prejudices. But it's not the case, that stigma, that people have is so detrimental. And I'm fortunate now that I really lucked into a position with a company, it's close to home is why I applied there, and they didn't seem to really care too much about, criminal records. They were really desperate to get people in. And, I now have a great job that's, tremendously beneficial, but it wasn't easy to get to that point. The first, I'm struggling now to make up for the fact that, the first 5 years, since I was released, that I really had to settle for, positions that weren't really long-term, weren't beneficial to my long-term goals. And I was trying again during that time. I was applying other places and doing interviews and getting my foot in the door, including I was actually hired by the college that I graduated from as a writing instructor. And I was issued a badge, a spot in the faculty parking lot. And the day before my, first day on the job, they called me and they said, "Oh, there's been an issue. Your Corey came back and we need to sit down and talk to you." And of course, my first day of the job was my last day. And so I'm thankful for you to hear my story and understand that the challenges that I face are really, molehills compared to the mountains that so many of our returning citizens have to climb. I had everything other than my record is the only thing that I didn't have, laid out before me like a red carpet, that my family and friends provided for me. And, my own, fortunate blessing of, education, the fact that my parents had either instilled that in me and the gifts that I was given by God to be able to learn. And, I had a great friend, a young man that I loved dearly. And we were in prison together, and he was like me, self-educated, but, a little bit different. He had no formal education. And we were talking about that. And he just said to me one day, you just need to understand that not everybody can do what you do. Not everyone can pick up a textbook and learn without an instructor, without a professor, without a teacher to explain things to them, without someone to break it down for them. Not everyone can learn, across a broad spectrum of subjects the way that you can. And he said, I can't. He said, I know I retain a lot of information, but I can't learn the way that you learn. And it was really, something that dawned on me that I had a gift, I had an ability. I can learn from books. I can learn, on my own, self-taught, whereas so many people, struggle with that. And so, again, the vast majority of people leaving prison have mountains to climb to re-enter society. And society is not laying out a red carpet for them. So I just ask that everyone who hears this tonight take every opportunity to help lay that foundation for those trying to get out. Something as simple as, if you support these causes, to please share our stories, my story, Jackie's story, Danelle's story. Let them know that we are good people who are trying to make a difference for the better. That almost everyone I met in prison wanted wanted an opportunity to make a difference, wants to make their family proud, wants to contribute to their families, especially, parents. So many people in prison have children. They want to contribute to their kids. No one wants to end up back in prison. No one wants to be homeless or stemming for change. No one wants to be working a dead-end job that's not ever going to be enough to provide for their families. And so we need to help pave the way for them. We need to spread these stories and share them, with our friends, with our colleagues, with our coworkers, with our inner circle. Sometimes we have
Carter, I got to
Yep.
stop you. We could listen to you all night, and I wish we could. It was beautiful, man. Thank you so much, and I'm sure people will have some time for questions. So I'm sure people
absolutely. Thank you so much. Sorry for being so long-winded.
That's okay. No, that was great. All right, and Danelle, let's see, Danelle Wright. Danelle, the floor is yours.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm going to try and be as thorough and brief as I possibly can. Again, my name is Donnell Wright. I'm a former heroin addict. I'm a former alcoholic, crack cocaine addict, homeless person, gangbanger, all those things I am formally. And I too came from a broken home. My father was abusive. He drank. My mother left my father when we were young, and I had a lot of problems with family separation. I was a medicine kid. I started sneaking into the medicine cabinet. There was a lot of things in there that sparked my curiosity, and I started out being a pill popper. My mother had a prescription for trazodone, and that's how I got started, along with my father, who used to give a lot of parties, and I was the beer boy. And when my father's friends and my uncles and aunts would ask me to go get them a beer, well, I took a few from my friends too. And that's how my alcoholism started. So I was a full-blown addict and alcoholic at a very young age. My first drug bust was in the 7th grade by the DEA at College Junior High School in Springfield, Mass. And that just led me on a road of overdoses and trouble with the law because I was addicted to various substances. So I started getting in trouble with the law. I suffered from early traumatic traumatic post syndrome. My mother was almost murdered. After she left my father, she met a man who plunged a butcher knife in her chest, and I had to save her life. That was a very traumatic experience for me. Subsequently, I was stabbed in the heart by my best friend, who my mother tried to tell me wasn't my friend, but as kids, we really don't listen. So I led a very troubled life growing up. I got involved with some bad drug dealers, and I owed them a lot of money. So I had to leave town because they were going to kill me. So I left Springfield, Massachusetts, and I ended up in Worcester, Massachusetts, where I ended up in a rehab called the Channing House. And I successfully completed that rehabilitation over a year. And I was in another program, a step-down program. That's when I really realized that life wasn't fair, that you could do the right thing and end up being punished or penalized for it. And I remember being in that rehab, and for some reason, a counselor or someone didn't like me, and they planted some stolen merchandise in my room. And I ended up getting kicked out of the program for something that I didn't do. And I remember sitting in the director's office and telling her, I didn't do this. And my life depends on me being able to stay in this program. And what she told me was that, well, you have to leave. And I believe you didn't do it. And she said, Mr. Wright, sometimes in life you're going to be accused of things that you didn't do. And you may have to pay the consequences for it. But sometimes it's not what happens to you, it's how you handle it. And I'll never forget those words because she was right. After I got out of the programs, I was doing very well. I was going to college. I was involved in a very serious accident where I sustained an aorta dissection. Rarely people survive from those. I went into the hospital at 250 pounds. I caught a blood infection of cellulitis and phlebitis. I went blind. I went from 250 pounds to 90 pounds. And I left the hospital with a hip machine, which is a machine that constantly feed you intravenous antibiotics. So I couldn't work. And I was suffering from depression, and I was getting ready to get evicted. So a friend of mine said, "Hey, why are you going to get out when you can make money like I'm making?" I go, "Well, how are you making money?" "I'm selling drugs." Well, I didn't want to sell drugs, but I didn't see any other alternative at that time. So I started selling drugs, and I became one of the biggest drug dealers in Worcester. Then I got busted. When I got busted, I was looking at 18 years in prison for drug trafficking and weapons possession. I ended up going to court, and I was put on house arrest for 2.5 years. And I successfully completed. I earned a real estate license. I earned an associate's degree in business from Quinsigamond Community College. I was working for Seven Hills, working with young men, troubled youth, and so a variety of accomplishments. I was the light of the probation department, according to them. But unfortunately, the crime that I committed carried a mandatory sentence, which means no matter what I did, I was going to prison. So the judge sentenced me on my birthday in 2004, and it was the Honorable Judge Factow. And he read a long list of things of my accomplishments, and he said the court was, and him himself was very impressed with the things I had accomplished. And it was unfortunate that he had to send me to jail today. He said, "But Mr. Wright, I'm going to send you to jail today, but from these accomplishments that you've shown the court, you have turned your life around. And I want you to continue on that path. I want you to go in that prison, and people are not necessarily going to be your friends, and you're going to find things will be somewhat out of your control. But I want you to go in there and continue on this path and be a light to those who are still in the darkness." Well, I went in there and I did everything the judge asked me to do. I went in that program and I helped start programs like mental health programs and other self-help programs, trying to help myself and the inmates that were in there. The individuals coming in from the outside, partakers, helped me get into Boston University, upon which I graduated with a degree in interdisciplinary studies and social justice with honors, which is very difficult to do in a prison environment with typewriting. They don't give you any breaks because you're an inmate. You're going to get a BU degree, you're going to earn it. And we did. While I was there, I also was talking to a lot of the kids that they brought in from the outside, the youth from the different schools and the programs. And we would tell them, about what we did to get there. And that was very instrumental in my development. I had sit downs with Commissioner Corsini, who ran the prison. And he allowed us to do things that he never allowed any other inmate to do. I went to the library every day. I educated myself along with the education I already had. I became a jailhouse lawyer who worked on other people's cases. I worked with institutions like FAM, Barbara Dugan. I worked with the Innocence Project. I worked with Prison Legal Services. And all of these people we would write back and forth letters to, and I would help get other inmates out who didn't know how to get themselves out, because a lot of their lawyers sold them out. You see, people think that the justice system is about justice. It's not. It's about money, right? Our bodies have a value on them. And the criminal justice system uses that to make themselves rich, fat, and happy, right? There's a lot of innocent people in prison. For instance, in Worcester County, the conviction rate is 99.7%. Why? Because anybody who takes a case to trial is gonna lose, especially if you're a minority, right? You're gonna get an all-white jury. So you're convicted of a crime. So they say, whether you're innocent or not, really doesn't matter sometimes. You're gonna take, and they're gonna tell you, you better cop out to the 6 to 7 years. Because if you take it to trial and you lose, you're going to get the maximum of 25 years. And you're going to get an all-white jury. They don't pull any punches. They tell you just like that. That's why the conviction rate is so high, because nobody wants to take it to trial. Whether you did it or not is not the point. You know you're going to lose because they're going to believe the police over you, even though the police are lying. That's right. Police do lie all the time. They plant evidence. They put guns to your head. I've had the police put so many guns to the back of my head and in my mouth, take me out in the middle of the woods, tell me they're going to hang me from a tree. Yes, they do that. Right? Are there good police officers? Absolutely. Know a lot of them. A lot of them are wonderful people, hardworking men and women that are there to do a job and go back home to their families. But there is another element out there that are up to no good, let's just say. So upon me doing all these accomplishments while I was incarcerated, I also went to the parole board, but I was denied. First time offense, non-violent, but I was denied parole. And they denied my parole for something that I didn't do 15 years ago. I was never convicted of it. I was charged, and it was just a phone call. It was a violation of a restraining order. My son's mother said I called her when I wasn't supposed to. It wasn't true, but they had a record of that. That's why they denied my parole. Yet, the guy who was in the cell across from me, who was a 3-time violent felon offender, assault and battery on a police officer, that's why he was there, he went to parole, and he got parole. I'm like, what's going on here? So since that was my first time in state prison, I was asking all the inmates, well, how did he get parole? And I didn't know. He said, oh, you don't understand how the parole board works. See, you didn't get parole because they knew you educated yourself. You graduated from BU while you were here. You're probably not coming back. They're going to get every penny out of you. Him, he's been here 3 or 4 times. They know he's coming back. That's why they gave him parole. Sure enough, 3 months later, he was back down the hall for another crime. So I learned something. I said, sometimes you can be the best inmate, do everything right. And just like the gentleman before said, he got 1 D report. Yeah, he had some stuff in the cell, but they'll throw you back behind the wall and throw away the key for something very insignificant that had nothing to do with why you were there. So upon me completing my sentence, finally getting out, I didn't have a driver's license and I didn't have any money because the money I did have, my family, one of my family members took it and spent it. So I had nothing when I got out. So here I am, I'm out. I'm on probation. I'm on parole. I got probation fees. I got parole fees. How am I going to pay them? I got no money. I got no job. I got no ID. I got no license. Right? So I had a car. I found a job. It's not on the bus line. So I said, well, I'm going to drive until I can save the money to pay my registry fees, to get my driver's license, to do the right thing. I'm trying so hard. I'm not out in the streets. I'm home. I'm doing the right thing. I get pulled over 5 or 6 times. Car gets towed, back in jail. And so they take me to court. The judge asked me, Mr. Wright, why do you keep driving? You don't have a license. So I told the judge, I said, listen, I just did 7 years in prison. I get out, I don't have any money. I got these parole fees, they want money. The registry wants money. What do you want me to do? Go back and sell drugs? I can't get a job. Just like the gentleman said before. I got jobs, but as soon as my query came back, they showed me the door. What do you want me to do? You see, our criminal justice system tells the public it's our fault. It's not our fault because there's a lot of people who go do their time and they learned their lesson. Okay? It's supposed to be about rehabilitation. Take your programs, do your time, pay your debt to society. We did that. The problem is, after we do that and we get out, we're still being punished. You're still punishing me. I just did my time. Where's the help?
What's a query, Danelle? Danelle, tell people what a query is.
A query is stands for Criminal Offender Report Information, right? And basically what it is it shows all of your arrests and it shows all of your offenses, but a lot of employers don't know how to read them. So there could be something on your record that you were not convicted of, but they make it very hard for people to determine that you weren't. So you see the charge and think, oh, he did that? Oh, he didn't do that. Somebody said he did, but he was found not guilty. So there isn't an employer education on how to read a court, right? Employers pull them, they have somebody read it, they see the charges. A lot of them, they don't even know how to read those queries. And a lot of the queries are outdated. A lot of the charges that are on your query are from years and years and years ago, but they never go off, they never drop off unless you have your record sealed, which is what I ultimately had to do, which is why I help other individuals seal their query now. Because if you don't say that you have been convicted of a felony, because they'll ask you in the application, have you ever been convicted of a felony? If you say no, and your query comes back and it's yes, they're going to fire you. So I tell people, tell the truth. I told the truth, right? So after that first time, when I didn't tell those people, about my core because I didn't know what was going to happen to me. After that, I learned my lesson. And my message now is to tell the truth and be accountable, be responsible, right? The parole and probation fees. How do they expect you to do that when you don't have a job? When you get out, you should have some type of grace period to be able to get yourself on your feet. Some type of job assistance. There was no job assistance or training. No one tried to help me get a job at the parole board or the parole department, excuse me. You know, there should be something connected with the unemployment office or with mass hire. You know, I have to really say that our justice system is set up for you to fail when you get out. It's not set up for you to succeed. But people believe it's the other way around. They think people go to prison and they get out and then they just mess up because they don't want to do right. That's not true. Most men and women who get out of prison want to do the right thing. As I mentioned, they've learned their lesson. But like the gentleman said before, they put obstacles in front of us that are sometimes insurmountable, no matter what you do. You got people coming out that are suffering from mental health, post-traumatic stress disorder. They put me in solitary confinement in a hole for 3 months in the summertime. It was 120 degrees with no water, with no running toilet. And then they want to let people out like that who's been locked up like an animal, treated like an animal. You get no social, you get no psychological, no emotional assessment, and they let them back out into the community that are full of guns and drugs. And then they expect these people to just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just be a, law-abiding citizen again. It don't work like that. A lot of these people, when they get out, they are traumatized. Their families don't want to help them because whatever situation, they can't go back like they used to. If their families are on Section 8, you can't go there because they'll lose your apartment. There's no housing. COVID exacerbated everything and made everything worse. So my message is that the organizations like the Office of Returning Citizens, where I went and spoke with a lot of my colleagues about what we need when people get out. Do you want people to get out that are angry, that run into roadblocks, that have become frustrated, and they're gonna, if you can't get money to pay your probation or parole fees because you can't get a job, you're gonna go get a gun and you're gonna rob somebody. That's what's going on out here. People are desperate. Gas is $5 a gallon. Food is high. This is going to be the new normal for a while. You think that people coming out of prison are going to be ready for this type of economic environment? Well, they're not. So we have to prepare these individuals. And a place like the Office of Returning Citizens and a lot of these peripheral social justice agencies are the answer. We need to let people know that we care. That's why I started a nonprofit organization. I care because I don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through, trying to reestablish myself back into the community, trying to be a law-abiding citizen again. They make it too difficult. It is purposely done, and it doesn't have to be that way. So I'm just here to say that support organizations like the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization. They're doing great work in the community, and we're just here to let you know that people can and do change. No one's perfect. There are going to be some people you're going to see in the news. The Justice Department and the DOC, if somebody messes up that gets out of prison and they mess up, they're going to make sure you know about it. Well, he was just released from MCI Cedar Junction and he committed a crime. But they don't tell you about the 100 people that got out that didn't commit a crime. The 100 people that got out that didn't recidivate and go back to prison, that started their own businesses, that are back reunited with their families, that are off of drugs and alcohol. Those are the stories that we need to see. Those are the stories that the public needs to hear, but they're not. And it's purposely done. You're kept purposely from those success stories. I'm one of them. The gentleman that spoke before me, he's one of them. The young lady that spoke before that, we are success stories. We're survivors. And what we want to do is replicate it, right? We want to share our experience, strength, and hope. And that's why we're here speaking to you tonight. Thank you so much and very much for listening.
Oh, Danelle, amen, amen. Oh my God, that was beautiful. Carter, did you want to ask Danelle a question?
Yeah, this is kind of for Danelle and it's kind of for everyone here. So Danelle, you mentioned Worcester and Channing House. So I graduated from QCC too. Was my first degree. But as I mentioned, I graduated, I just graduated from Maine Maritime Academy a couple of weeks ago. And so my dad and my mom, my dad were up here, for my commencement ceremony. And my dad was, talking about the work that I'm doing. And he was telling me about this guy that he knew that he was in the Channing House with, and he was showing me pictures and he was telling me this story, and it hadn't dawned on me. Donnell, do you know Chuck Reed?
Yeah, I know Chuck. Me and Chuck are good friends.
I
Get
know.
out of here.
Yeah, that's my
You mean
dad.
Chuck went to That's your dad?
Yep.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
He just
Yeah,
said, I just messaged him. He said he's gonna freak out when you tell him. So yeah,
Yo,
so
listen, I was just talking with Chuck the other day. Oh my God. Listen, Chuck is the most gentle, lovingest. You got a great dad, man. I gotta meet you, man.
yeah, absolutely, for sure. We'll make that happen. But no, he was telling me,
Jerry.
how much of what you're doing and how great it is. And he was showing me and my wife pictures, and he was telling us all about you. And you're a legend to him too. So just, yeah, that's just big. I just wanted to share that with you.
Oh, Jerry, you really outdid yourself. Jerry Jane, you two really, I was not expecting that.
I didn't know anything about it, man. But it's beautiful. It's beautiful what you're saying. Wow, what a nice
I
connection.
got tears in my eyes right now, man.
Oh, what a nice.
Oh. Welcome home, man. All I can say is I'm proud of what you're doing. You went through a lot in there, and listen, let's hook up. Let's do some good work together. I'm ready. I'm ready to fight for justice, man. I'm ready to fight for what's right and get the message out, man. That you got some good people out here that have been formerly incarcerated, but we're ready to give back in a big way.
Oh
Yeah.
man, you guys are so inspirational. Jane, how do you
I just
visit the
wanted to
last
jump.
15
I
minutes?
wanted to jump in and thank Donnell and Jackie and Carter for their stories. Thank you all for being here to listen to their stories. And what they all said was, we need to hear that there are people like them that, they need their second chance. They get out, they paid the price. And it's time for us to support them to start their lives again. And what GBIO needs us to do is to get behind the efforts that the steering team, which Jackie and Donnell are part of the steering team that is guiding the work and letting us know what we can do to support them. People showed up for the mayor, and they asked her, the Office of Returning Citizens had the most pitiful budget, $300,000, 3 people working in the office to support thousands of people. They did the research, they did the advocacy work, they met with the mayor, they met with her staff. They said, we need $1.9 million to really serve people. And she listened, and the city council listened, and they said, yes, we will give you the 1.9 million. Then she published her budget, and she gave 1.3 million, which was a big jump from $300,000. But they had done their research. That other money that she hadn't provided was all meant for community grants, for the programs that Carter and Donnell are working in that are really making a difference. And they said, respectfully, thank you for raising the budget for Office of Returning Citizens, but we need the $1.9 million that you said you would give us. And they testified in front of the mayor, in front of the city council, and they convinced them to put the money back in and got that 1.9 million. And that is and GBIO members showed up, and they were at that meeting supporting them, and they were writing letters to their city councilor and writing letters to the mayor. And that made the difference. And now we need to hold them accountable to really pass that budget. The items are back in the budget, but it's got to pass. Other things happening at the state level that GBIO is working on is IDs, which Jackie and Danelle touched upon a little bit. People need IDs when they get out of prison. And most people getting out of prison don't have a license. They don't have a Massachusetts state ID, they issue ID. They can't get housing, they can't get jobs, they can't get benefits without an ID. And there's a big disconnect. So they're working at the state level with the Department of Transportation and the Department of Corrections to fix this. And another issue that they're working on is the third one, Danelle. You want to jump in? The parole and probation fees?
Yes, parole and probation fees, yes. And that's something that Governor Baker has also been pushing for. He is for the elimination of the parole and probation fees, and I think the next administration that will be coming in will be for that as well.
It's in the budget right now, and if nothing happens and no one objects and there's no changes, then when the new budget for the fiscal year starting at the end of June goes through, the elimination of statewide elimination of parole and probation fees will be part of that budget. I just want to say there is a small but a grace period of 6 months once you're released that you do not owe parole and probation fees for, but still, as John L. said, you don't have a job, you don't have income, you don't have money available to pay that. That's a parole violation, not paying that, and that could get you right back where you just left. So,
yeah. So we have people like Jackie and Danelle on the steering team that are identifying the issues that we can mobilize on. And when you come to a meeting like this and you join GBIO at your synagogue, at Temple Sinai, at Temple Beth Zion, Jerry is our reentry captain. He's going to get the information from GBIO when we need to call our legislators or we need to show up at a hearing and give our support and write our emails. So that you're here, you hear these stories, you hear these folks, and we stand alongside them when we speak up to our legislators and we say, yes, we think these people deserve the second chance. We need to take down the barriers. We need to change policies and make it easier for folks when they get out. So that is what we're able to do. One of the things that we are doing, they're organizing a meeting. It's tentatively scheduled for May 26th, but it might not happen because they need to make sure that the people that we need to make demands to are there. We need to stand united and we need to get the people that we need to ask in the room with us. And that's what the steering team, people like Danelle and the GBIO organizers and Jackie, they find who are the people we need to talk to and when do we need to rally everybody behind a particular policy change that we want to push. So we hope that you all will show up when we reach out to you. I'm going to put an evaluation form in the chat right now, and you can let us know that you're interested in being contacted when we need you to act. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jerry to take some questions from the class, from the group.
Okay.
Sound
right.
good?
Yep.
All right.
Ready? I just want to say before we're winding down, but I want to recommend 2 books to those of you who are interested in this topic, especially. One is called Homeward by Bruce Weston, a Harvard professor, did a wonderful study. He interviewed about 150 Massachusetts people who are coming out of prison. It's called Homeward, Life in the Year After Prison by Bruce Weston. And the other book I think you're going to be very interested in, it's called Boy with a Knife. Boy with a Knife. And it's a book about Carter Reed. It's Carter's story by Professor Gene Traunstein, who wrote this book about Carter a few years ago. And it's definitely, I think you'd really want to read it. So it's called Boy with a Knife. All right, so we can take some questions if people have questions. I don't know how we do this. Maybe just
You want to, yeah, raise your hand.
raise your hand. Okay, Simon, I see your hand.
Hi, I greatly appreciated this, and Carter, and I knew of you from the book, and So this was great. I won't repeat how great it is and just get right to the question. Carter, you mentioned you had a molehill to climb and others, most have a mountain. And I think, Jacqueline, you related how fortunate you were. And all three of you are very bright and everything. But how do we help those who need the mountain, who are not that up there intellectually, can't do the courses, and are really having a hard time in prison and programming and so forth? I see that as the major issue in terms of recidivism and reentry. So just a very open question. I have my own take, but I'll end it there because I know time is limited.
I just want to say, I think recognizing that the needs are there and recognizing that it takes the whole community to make successful reentry, recognizing that the little microaggressions and discrimination against returning citizens that exist, you don't know what you can't fight what you don't know. You can't support what you don't know. And so being here tonight, getting an education, finding out what the issues are, putting a face on the returning citizens so that we're not just a statistic, it's something that you have to fear or worry about or be concerned about, and not realize that we have the same issues and concerns as everybody else on the other side of the wall. I mean, we care about our families, we care about our health, we care about jobs, we care about security, food insecurity, all those issues. We share those. And so recognizing that, so you being here tonight is a great first step and becoming involved.
Any final questions? I know we're winding down. Well, why
Jerry,
don't I? Oh, Emma.
Sorry, Jerry.
Sure.
Yeah, so firstly, I just wanted to say I am just so incredibly touched by what everybody said. I'll just quickly just kind of explain. I want to ask a question, but I think it's important to talk a little bit about why I'm here. So I'm a social worker and I work with individuals experiencing incarceration, and I see every day, how the system continually prioritizes the safety and security of the facility, but and it overshadows it. It's overshadowed by, sorry, I'm very excited about talking with you guys. So the prioritization of safety and security overshadows the dignity and worth of people. I see it all the time, and it's this really big struggle that I have while working in a jail, because I don't support the system, but I recognize that it's important to be advocating. So my question for you guys is, what do you want? What are some things that you think people, like a social worker, for instance, what should we be doing to, whether it be, in facilities and outside of facilities, what should we be doing right now?
One of the things that was helpful for me, was incredibly helpful for me, was there's a program that is just become statewide. I think as of January of this year, it's become statewide, and it's behavioral health for justice involved individuals. And very quickly, all it does is matches a returning citizen, or actually you get matched and you find out about this. I bet now you find out about it before you actually leave incarceration. But once you get out, you're going to need, so I don't care if you've been there for 3 years, 3 days, for whatever, your reentry to the community is going to be a transition, and you are going to need help on an economic level, on an emotional level, on a psychological level to make that transition. So you're assigned on a one-on-one basis a reentry navigator, and that person is there to guide you, to hold your hand, to pat you on the back when you have a success. And you set goals with that person, whether it's getting a license, whether it's getting your prescription filled, whether it's getting to appointment, no matter how small or big the issue is. and getting information about that program and getting involved in that program, if it's possible. That's one thing. Educating yourself about the programs that are available so that when you have someone that you're dealing with, you know the facilities, you know where to send them, you know the people to talk to. I wish the Office of Returning Citizens was more funded and staffed so that, I mean, I've recommended people getting out after I got out, go there, call them. They can give you the information that you can spend years trying to find on your own in a hit or miss basis. But those are the two things that that I would suggest.
I'm afraid I've got to end it here. I wish we had more time and we could do this again. I want to close by introducing Rav Teferet. And Rav Teferet, our wonderful inspirational rabbi at Temple Beth Zion, will give a closing blessing. Here's Rav Teferet.
Thank you, Jerry. And thank you, everyone who spoke tonight. I just want to take a moment of silence for us to witness and for what we've heard and the stories that we've heard to plant themselves in our soul so that we can carry them forward. And then after a moment of silence, we'll pray together. O Holy One of blessing, whose presence fills creation, first and foremost, God, I want to offer prayer for the voices that we heard tonight. Thank you, God, and bless them for their service. Thank you for allowing them to share with us their experience, their strength, and their hope. May we be vessels to receive this, and may it challenge us and motivate us to stand up and show up when we're called to do that. May we become witnesses to their lives, and may we make real our belief in teshuvah, that return is possible, that atonement is possible, because God, you are the ultimate in forgiveness. Let us be messengers of forgiveness. May our world be based in forgiveness and a desire to help and bring everyone to their purpose, to their usefulness, and to partnering with you in creation. God, these are not easy tasks, but we know that we're not alone. As we look around the screen, we see all of our co-conspirators and people that we can turn to in this work. We just pray for the strength to be able to share the blessing. Let us say together, Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Oh, beautiful, Rav Teferet. Oh my God. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for participating. This is special.
Thank you.
Speakers. Wonderful, wonderful job, and very inspirational. And we'll do it again sometime. Okay. Be well. Be safe. Stay strong. Stay strong.
Thank you.